Well, welcome everybody. It is Don't Get Rusty, our weekly, make that monthly webinar series, talking to you about things that hopefully will keep you current and ready to fly. My name is Chris Moser, and today we are doing regulations. Yeah, we know, but we're going to do it anyway. So
Hooray for regulations.
exactly, hooray regs. But interestingly enough, I have to say the one thing was as I was prepping this thing, it actually turned out there's some cool stuff in here. So I think we're gonna have some fun. But let's go ahead and do some of the basic stuff first. We want to thank Jeppesen for generously sponsoring our program, and of course the whole family of companies there, Boeing, ForeFlight, Jeppesen, for sponsoring the program. We appreciate it, and make sure you check out their stuff. Some of the stuff for housekeeping. Look at if you want to submit a question, and we know you guys like to do that, here's how you want to do it. On the attendee control panel, if you are using the computer, which is this tall one right here, so if you're on a PC or a Mac or something like that, you'll see the little question box here, the little question bubble. You want to click on that, and then that will open up the window where you can submit questions, and we will do our best to answer your questions as best we're able. Unfortunately, Pablo is not here with us this month. He is actually on his way out to California on some well-deserved PTO. So that said, we'll do our best because he's normally our question guru. So we're going to work together as a team and see if we can figure it out. On the iPad, if you're using an iPad or a tablet of some sort, you're going to see on your app the little question arrow or little question mark right there. If you tap on that, then the thing will pop up, and you're going to want to put your question in. In both cases, notice that you want to hit that send button, because that's the way it makes sure, because if you just type the question in and don't hit send, we won't see it. So make sure you hit the send button in either case, whether you're using like a computer or the tablet. All right, like I said, Pablo is on vacation. He's normally our main host, but let's go ahead and jump. I'm Chris Moser. I work at AOPA. I'm the Senior Director of Flight Training Education, and I am a CFI. And you'll see some of my other stuff there. And basically, I work to help flight schools and CFIs and trying to build resources for them. We also, of course, have with us Stephen Schroeder behind the scenes. Say hi, Stephen.
Hi, Stephen.
He's our coordinator of the Flight Training Initiative, works here at AOPA. And Stephen, you want to say anything else about yourself before we move on?
I mean, it's all pretty self-explanatory. It's been a lovely journey working with you guys here and having a good time making these programs happen.
Awesome. And then our special guest is John Collins. John, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, hi everybody. My name is John Collins. I'm the Chief Flight Instructor and the Manager of Aviation Safety Programs for the AOPA Air Safety Institute. I'm, of course, a flight instructor. I'm responsible for our online flight instructor refresher courses, our monthly safety webinars. Our next one is next week. It's going to be a really good one, NTSB Insider Episode 2, Finding the Golden BB. We've got 3 interesting accidents that the causes don't turn out what they initially presented them to be. So I'll just leave that as a little teaser for you. Sign up. If you've already watched episode 1 with us, you're registered to watch next week's. If not, go to airsafetyinstitute.org and you can sign up for next week's webinar. That is also available for Wings Credit and the AOPA app webinar badge and 1,000 points, just like today's. And I'm not stealing Chris's thunder a little bit, but that's okay. So.
All right, cool, John. Well, thanks for being here with us. I appreciate you. And I know we've seen some comments already. People are missing Pablo. And again, he will be here next month, but he just when we had to schedule things, he is on PTO. So I'm sure he's having a good time. And I know he's dying not being here. He misses being here, I know. Anyway, some quick reminders, and we will try to remind you throughout the presentation again. If you are attending this webinar live with us, make sure that if you want Wings credit, make sure you only get that, you only are going to get that Wings credit if you are viewing live. So if you're watching this as a recording later, you will not get Wings credit for that. The Wings credit is automatic as long as you've registered with the email that you use for FAAsafety.gov or the FAA portal. As long as you're using that email that you use for your Wings program, you will get the credit. It'll be submitted automatically. You don't need to do anything. That'll just happen. If for some reason you registered with an email that is not the one that you use for FAA Safety, well, in that case, then just email us. What would be the best way to email us, Stephen, at FT Initiative?
Are you there, yes, Stephen? At the FT Initiative at AOPA.org.
There we go. ftinitiative at AOPA.org. That's FT, and then just spell out the word initiative at AOPA.org. You can send them that message. Otherwise, though, as long as you've registered with your email address that you use for FAA, you're good to go. This is being recorded. We will put it on YouTube and on the AOPA's webinars.aopa.org section. It's under AOPA Live on YouTube. You'll see it right there on the screen. So that'll show up in probably about 2 days it takes after it gets processed and posted up there. So maybe sometime tomorrow or certainly by the weekend that should be up. All right, today in aviation history, just really quick, May 20th, 1927, this is when Charles Lindbergh did the first solo nonstop flight across the Atlantic. And there it is, a picture of the Spirit of St. Louis, 3,600 miles and only 33 hours and 29 minutes of flight time. I'm sure that was a little against the 8 hours we normally would do as a flight instructor, but yes, and he won the Orteig Prize of $25,000, kind of cool. All right, let's go ahead and roll our poll to get things going. Today's topic is regs. And you'll see the question, when do you actually look at the regs? Do you think it's A, whenever I have a question and don't know what the regs say? I have a set routine of regularly reviewing them. Only during my flight review or IPC, maybe, and never I pass my check ride, so I'm good. I don't need to know regs. So what do you think, John? What do you think the answer might be on this one?
Well, I did pass my check ride, several of them, but I regularly look through them to see what's going on and make sure I'm up to snuff on things. There are things, and there's some that came up when we were prepping for this. I was like, oh yeah, forgotten about that. So this is going to be a really good webinar to refresh those and to take a look at some regs we don't normally look at and some regs that we do. So yeah, of course you have to do them during the flight review and the IPC. So you know, might as well do them now.
Exactly. And in fact, I know for me too, admittedly, I'm an aviation nerd. I'm just watching. We got 74% on the poll. So we'll just I'd like to get that to 80%. So we've got 5% more to go. One of the things I know I like to do is I actually have read, I'm a nerd. I've read the FAR AIM twice through back when I was instructing full time. I haven't done that in a long time because, you know, I can sleep now. But so that said, it is good to review, and especially when questions come up for me. So, all right, let's go ahead. I think we got 80%. There it is. Let's reveal that poll, Stephen. Let's see what we've got. Here it comes. All right, I don't see the window popping up on mine, but I can see the results here. So it looks like the vast majority saying whenever I've got a question and I don't know what the regs say. And that's a good reason to do it.
That's excellent.
Yeah, I think so. And then the 14% only doing a flight review or IPC. Well, at least hopefully you're doing that on a regular basis. And then 2%, it's always that 2%. We always have 2% for some reason. I pass my check ride, whatever. So
we'll take a look at who actually said that and see what's going on.
That's right. All right, let's go ahead and we'll jump to the next slide here, and you can close the poll. Thanks, Stephen. All right, so what are we covering today? I know we've got questions rolling in. I'm going to do my best to try to pay attention to looking at those while I'm presenting here, and John and I will both be looking, and Stephen too. But what are we covering? Today we're going to cover, these are the ones that I picked out that I thought were generally misunderstood, or the ones that both John and I run across when we're doing flight reviews or working with people that they seem to forget. So you can see the topics right here, anywhere from minimum VFR altitudes all the way down to talking about basically with it's specific things like basic med. It's how you renew it or how you keep it current. So it's not like we're going to do like you did in your private. We're definitely going to be talking about things that people seem to misunderstand and get wrong. So some of these you might look at it, I already know that. Maybe we'll surprise you. I know that John and I surprised each other. We were looking stuff up that we said, and we're like, oh, I didn't know that. So let's take a look at that. All right, let's get to this. All right, the first one is minimum VFR altitudes. And I know you probably were thinking, oh, it's the 1,000 feet above, 2,000 feet horizontal, that whole thing. I didn't want to review that. The one that I like to talk about is one that I came across. Remember I told you I read the regs and being a big nerd, and I came across this one, and it really surprised me. How low are you allowed to go when you're approaching to land? Well, if you look at 91-129 Echo, in class Delta, and this applies to both Charlie and Bravo, if the airport you're coming to, it's obviously a towered airport, has a visual approach indicator, then you are not allowed to go below the glide slope until necessary for a safe landing. In other words, the reg literally says, quote, at or above glide slope until necessary for a safe landing. So that means that like, oh, I'm gonna let it go a little red and then put it down on the threshold. That would be against that reg. So I know, John, you had some thoughts about this too, because it's
Yeah,
this is
I was looking at that, and I was reading the reg, and verbatim it says visual approach slope indicator. So to me, that's a VASI. What if I'm using a PAPI? Can I do it? Can I go below the glide slope or the in that scenario? I don't know. I think you have a visual approach indicator. You should be using that. There are some times though when it is necessary to do that, and like here at Frederick right now, we've got some taxiway construction going on, and so if we're landing on runway 5 and we want to turn off early and get into the parking area, we're either going to do it in that first turnoff, which is about 1,100, 1,200 feet down the runway, or we're going to go down all the way to taxiway Bravo, which is another 3,000 or 4,000 feet there. So, planning a short approach like that, making a short field landing, making that turnoff, that's probably pretty good. But if you're doing it, and I watched a guy land short at another runway and actually land on the grass, then pop up onto the pavement, probably not a good idea. I would not want to do that.
That's a big thing I know that I say for when I'm training students or doing flight reviews and things too. It's like if you're at a 5,000 here at Frederick, we've got a 5,000 foot runway effectively, and it's like if you're coming in and you're trying to go below glide slope so you can stick it on the end of the threshold, say a 172 or something like a typical GA aircraft. In a 172, there's no reason for you to be putting it on the threshold when you've got that much runway, because it takes us easily less than 1,000 feet to get it stopped. So I like to land on the 1,000 foot markers as a nice visual reference so I can practice my short field technique, but I'm definitely not, getting below glide slope. I'm over the runway and I'm not getting in any danger there. So just something to consider. Keep it legal, keep it safe. If you're flying to a small field, like here we got clear view, it's a tiny little runway. There's no visual slope, and it's such a short runway. You need to be putting it pretty darn close to the threshold to make sure you've got enough room to stop.
Of course, Clearview doesn't fall under this reg because it's in class golf airspace.
Exactly. Oh, that too, and plus there's no tower, it's golf, and there's no approach. I don't remember there being an approach slope indicator there anyway, no. But it's not a class Charlie, Delta, or Bravo. So just something interesting. And I know somebody mentioned here, so everybody's busting. A lot of people do it, and that's my argument is, if you were doing this and something were to happen, you're gonna have a hard time arguing before a judge why it was necessary for you to go below glide slope on a runway that long. So yeah, and again, somebody asked about off airport ops, and so that's a different story because we're not talking about a towered field there. This is for a towered field.
Yep.
Okay, yes, airspace is the key, exactly. Somebody wrote there. All right, let's go to the next one. This is, by the way, there is a handout for all of these. It is the slides, and we put the notes in there because as we were researching this, tons of links, a lot of AOPA stuff. There's a couple ones that are bold method, other things that I found. So that's for your reference there, so you can have these notes afterwards to review. All right. So, John, you want to take this one? Special VFR.
Special VFR. If you are not an instrument rated pilot, then it's going to be during the daytime, sunrise to sunset. If you're instrument rated, you can get a special VFR clearance at night. However, 1 mile visibility is kind of interesting to kind of work around. Definitely need to remain clear of clouds. And you have to request it from ATC. They cannot give it to you unless you actually request it. They may hint around at it. Did you want something special from me? Are you looking for something?
Right.
But if you're kind of keyed in on things and realizing, okay, I'm getting back to the airport, and this happened to me. I was out on a DNR flight with the West Virginia Department of Natural Resources. We were looking for deer spotters. It was a 4-hour flight, and tower was closed by the time I got back to my airport. And it was the visibility was starting to decrease. So AWOS was reporting, or ASOS was reporting, I think it was 2.5 miles visibility. I'm like, oh, okay. If I'm going to be totally legal, I mean, nobody's around at night. Even the guards over on the air guard base were asleep. I could have landed, nobody would have known. But with somebody else on the airplane, with me being a flight instructor and knowing that I'm going to be busting a reg, I called flight service to get a clearance, and I think I woke them up too. And it was like 1 a.m. And it took a little while to get the clearance because they had to get coordinated with Potomac approach, Dulles approach at the time, and then got me the clearance. And I got back in and was able to land and called them and said, hey, I'm down. You can have the rest of the airspace, and it was good. There's always a question of who do you call? I mean, if there's a tower operating, then you want to talk to the tower. If there's not a tower there and it's Class E to the surface or Class D or whatever, who are you going to call? And so flight service is usually your best bet to start with, and they'll be able to make that coordination for you.
Exactly.
Should you use it? Well, that's that's up to you. You know, if you can go to someplace else that's going to be VFR, maybe that's the best option for you. But you know, that's going to be a risk assessment you need to make and make a determination: can I get in there? Again, if you're doing this at night, you need to be instrument rated. The airplane needs to be instrument equipped, because you may have to use those instruments in the procedure. So you know, make sure you've got that on board if you're doing that.
Exactly. And so I've got two questions here. I just want to address really quick on these as well. And by the way, the link that we've got in the notes, it's actually a Bold Method article that I found. Did a great job of explaining this if you want to go back and reread. And a couple of the questions where it says if the person's instrument rated, why would it be better to use special VFR instead of just filing? Well, it could be that you're on a VFR flight, you get to the airport and there's a low-lying cloud layer or something. And it's definitely something where you definitely look at it going like, I feel safe. I can see the airport. I can get in. I call for the special VFR, and that way I don't have to worry about going and shooting an approach. So like John said, it's got to be something where the conditions are good enough. You get at least 1 mile visibility. Probably I would want more than that doing this, and staying clear of the clouds. That's probably where I would use it, is the ability, like I'm looking, the clouds are below VFR, but I know that I can stay clear and get in. That's where I might use it instead of going and shooting the approach. And it says at night. So Ed's asking, could also ask for a contact approach. Yes, you could. That would be on an instrument flight though for the contact approach. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then if you want to use special VFR at night, you do need to be instrument rated and I believe current. I have to go back and double check that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. That's true. Somebody mentioned you can't see clouds at night. That is correct, Drew.
Right.
And so that would be, you'd want to make sure that you need to be making sure that I can see what I think I see. Now, we normally don't do a lot of IFR on the show, but today, this was one that definitely popped up when I was thinking about what are regs that people seem to forget. And so that said, I wanted to do the ones for IFR comm failures, IFR two-way radio failures. And we have the link in the handouts too for this from the Air Safety Institute. And the main one is really the one where it's leaving the clearance limit. So I know we got a lot of VFR pilots or student pilots on, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to show that I thought this was a great way to help remember it. Now, for my instrument rated pilots out there, you probably remember your Avenue F and your MEA. It's all right there on the screen. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this one, which is like, you know, if I lose comms, what route do I follow? And you use the assigned vectored expected filed Avenue F, or the altitude I fly is the highest of my MEA, minimum, expected, or assigned. But the next one's the one I really wanted to talk about. I put this on for reference, but this is the one that for me is I can remember, even if I get out of instrument currency, I can remember the MEA, the Avenue F thing, but this is the one that I always forget. And it's when do you leave your clearance limit? And I recently did an IPC. It was last year I did an IPC, and somebody showed me this graphical format. And I'm like, oh, this makes it a lot easier for me to figure this out. And especially if I were to have this printed out or put it into my tablet, my electronic flight bag. And so it just shows you right here, is the clearance limit a fix from which an approach begins? Yes or no? And then it lays it out for you. And I found this a much easier way. So I just wanted to share that with you. Having this graphical layout of those regs, to me, makes it easier to kind of follow the flow chart. And again, if you had this with you in the cockpit, maybe you could use this if you did lose comms. But reviewing it before you go flying is probably a good idea, because that way I'm not trying to look up stuff on my tablet while I'm flying on instruments and I've lost comms at the same time. So,
of course, you can go to the link in the notes and print this out, and it'll print 2 pages, double-sided. You can cut it out, put it on your knee board. You'd be good.
You guys hear me?
I can hear you, Stephen. I can't hear Chris.
Yeah, Chris seems to have cut out on us.
Let's see if we can get back in touch with him. Anyhow, let's go to the next slide while we're waiting for him to come back online. We'll talk about VFR Lost Comms, actually.
We have lost comms.
We have lost comms with Chris, so we're going to talk about VFR Lost Comms. Maybe. Maybe not.
Try this.
Okay. All right, I'm going to show it from my side here, I think. Let's see if I can get that in.
Am I back yet?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay, let me do this.
There we go. Always a good time.
Okay, there we go. Am I back? Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Technical difficulties. All right, let's go ahead to the next slide. So now, talking about lost comms, my gosh, it literally happened and we didn't have a flow chart to follow. All right, VFR Lost Comms. This is a one I'm sure you know about in VFR. Obviously, most of us will probably just go to like a non-towered field or something and look for light gun signals. We all know that
Right.
one. But for the lost comms, the one I wanted to point out is I will often ask people during a flight review or something, I was like, what are you going to do if you're VFR and lost comms? And most of the time they say, like, you're heading back to Frederick, which is a towered field, it's class Delta. And then, they'll say, well, I would just turn and I go fly to a non-towered field, which is totally a fine answer to do. But the thing that I wanted to point out was just on this one, what you can do is, this is actually in the AIM 4-2-13, remain outside the Delta, fly above it, look down, figure out, see if you see any traffic, figure out which way they're flying, then come in on the 45, just like you would at a non-tower, and start looking for light gun signals. So you are totally allowed to do that in class Delta airspace, but you just want to follow this basic procedure. If you're not comfortable, you don't feel safe, by all means, go to a non-towered field, but just wanted to point this one out. All right,
But
John,
also, I think the other thing with that is, it doesn't hurt. Actually, it's pretty helpful if you ask them to throw you some light gun signals from time to time, daytime and nighttime. Nighttime's pretty easy to see them from the tower. It's it's dark, you can see that light. Daytime, you have to really be looking closely to see it, and it also gives them an opportunity in the tower to practice setting light gun signals. Those things hang in there and they don't get used all that often, so giving them a chance to pull them down and use it, it's helpful for the controllers as well. So and if you swing by any of our upcoming events, we've got an Air Safety Institute business size card of in-flight and on the ground light gun signals. I'd be happy to give them to you. Look for us at AirVenture and our two AOPA hangouts and our the Aviator showcases coming up later this year. So,
all right, great. And so again, there's notes in there if you want to use that one. Jumping ahead, I saw some questions earlier. And by the way, somebody did mention, I see there quite a few people mentioning, yeah, Squawk 7600 for lost comms, can totally do that. It says, a bit confusing. Do you remain out until getting the signal? No. So the one that George is asking, what do you do if you're going to come back in the pattern? Actually, what you want to do is you stay above the airspace, determine the pattern, then go ahead and fly the 45, because you got to figure that Delta airspace is between 3 and 5 miles out, depending on the size of the airspace that they have. And so you just want to go ahead and enter, go down to pattern altitude outside the airspace, enter on the 45, come on in, and they'll trust me, tower's going to notice, like, hey, there's an airplane here, and they're not talking to me. They're going to start shooting you light gun signals. And I know, John, you mentioned getting that practice at it too.
yeah.
So, all right. This next one, this was one I saw several times earlier. There's people asking about strobe lights, and this is one that there's an FAA letter of interpretation about. If you have an airplane, let's say like a Nest Model 172, you've got the 2 strobe lights on each of the wingtips, and then the red flashing beacon on the tail. Do you have to have both? If one is broken and the other one's not, can you just, like, for example, say the red beacon is out, can I just mark that in op and then go ahead and just fly with the strobe lights? And there's an FAA letter of interpretation by gentleman Letts, was the one that requested it in 2017, and the answer is no. The FAA has said in this letter of interpretation that that is part of the entire anti-collision system, and so therefore, if you have both red and the flashing beacons, both of them need to be working. That is required equipment under their interpretation. So that is a no-go in that sense. It needs to be fixed before you go flying.
Yeah.
So,
We do have a question from the audience from Pablo.
I'll say Pablo.
What if you lost battery, no electric, can't communicate at all? Do you still fly to the airport? Can't squawk.
Yes. So if you lost all battery and you're at that sort of situation, again, it's up to you. You might make the decision to go to a non-towered field, but you can still fly into that reg that I mentioned before. You can still fly in and look for light gun signals and be able to come in that way. And so it's the same thing whether you have lights or not. Now, I'm trying to think of, it was at nighttime, that's a really bad situation. It would depend on maybe your state, how you felt safety-wise, because of course the tower wouldn't see you at night. So maybe then I might go to a non-towered field, although a lot of towered fields are closed at night anyway. Okay, hopefully that answers that question. Let's go ahead and jump to the next one to see if we have any other ones. All right, let's see. All right, there we go. Inoperative equipment. I know that, oh look, there's my camera back. That was completely random. I tried turning it on like minutes ago. So inoperative equipment, 91-213. So this is one that I came across, and I know, John, you guys have done an entire webinar on this one, correct?
We did a 4-part series webinar last year on airworthiness documents, and it was really in depth. I'd encourage you to take a look at it. There's a link in the notes, but we go through and look at all these different things to determine, how can you determine the airworthiness of your aircraft? And it's very useful both as a renter and as an owner. To go through and understand where all this information is coming from, type certificate data sheet, the equipment list, all the stuff that's listed in the regulation 91-205, which we all know, tomato flames and all the rest of those that are part of that. And then of course, anything that's required by airworthiness directives, you really need to have all that information to make sure that you're understanding what you can fly with and what you can fly without. And of course, if you're flying without something, if it is inoperative, how do you take care of it? Do you have to remove it from the aircraft, or can you just disable it and placard it and let it go at that? So that's that's kind of the tree that's there. And in that webinar series, our presenter went through and really went into depth on all that stuff. So about 4 hours worth of very good watching. There's also a handout with that particular one as well, but you can find that at airsafetyinstitute.org and take a look at it. I'd highly recommend it.
Yes. And so one of the things I just wanted to point out here too, that a lot of folks know, and I know this was something I came across sometime during my commercial or CFI training, and I was going through and reviewing for a check ride or reviewing for something, and I was looking at 91-213, and I noticed that I had always been taught 3 things to check: ADs, the 91-205, which is like your tomato flames, flaps, grab guard, that sort of thing, which has the required equipment, like the temperature gauge and the oil pressure gauge, that sort of thing. And then looking in the equipment list in the POH. But there are 4 things listed under this reg, and I remember seeing that first one. It said something about airworthiness, requirements or airworthiness certifications, and I was like, what is that one? And I asked the people at my school, and they all were just like, oh, that's the equipment list. I'm like, no, that's number 2. It says equipment list there. And so I went digging and digging, and I found an old advisory circular, and I kept digging and digging. And then what I discovered was you're supposed to go look at a type certificate data sheet. And that is a summary of the airworthiness regulations. And I put the link in the notes so you can go find these on the FAA's website. And so the big part of this is that you look up your aircraft model, you scroll down, and like for the 172, they've got every model from the 172 all the way through the S model, the most current one. And then you just have to kind of go through and find your model, and you'll look, and it'll have, for the most part, there's nothing extra required in the 172 in this case. But there are ones as you go farther back where they started requiring things like you have to have a POH, or you have to have, like in some of the older models before they had those, I guess, and they have to have a stall warning indicator, which maybe on some of the ones hadn't been required before. So you want to go double check that to see. And what I do is, I can't say that I look at those all the time. I typically fly 172, so I will periodically go and, like, usually when I'm instructing, it'll come up and I go and I look. And so just periodically go and check and see what's required there for that. And somebody asked, what's tomato flames? Tomato flames is an acronym for 91-205. There are 3 types of operations that we do: daytime VFR, nighttime VFR, and instrument. And so we've got these memory aids. Tomato flames is the one for daytime VFR. And so it's like temperature gauges, oil pressure gauge, manifold pressure, airspeed indicator, that sort of thing. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but you definitely just look that up online. You can find that for sure. All right, I'm trying to pay attention to all the questions too. They're coming in fast and furious and seeing what I can do. All right. Okay, so I think that's the basic thing. There's a great article, I think 2 articles I found there. One is the regs, and the other article is from Pilot Protection Services, which talks about this topic, which I thought you might find interesting. Yes, so somebody says they've got an experimental amateur built. It's not in the operating limitations. So we're asking about strobes still. And John, help me out on this one. One person was asking, are strobes on the previous slide required during daytime? They're required to be operational. Turning them on, the FAA wants us to, but I'm trying to remember. Right. I don't recall if it's a reg to have them on. I think you have to have anti-collision lights on in the daytime. I would assume, I guess the answer would be yes.
Yes, I err on the side of caution. I light up the plane, and particularly with LED lights now. I mean, you're not going to be burning through a lot of bulbs anymore. So, you know, throw them on, make yourself visible. But you know, again, strobes, you do have to be somewhat careful with them if you're operating inside clouds or at night and you don't want to blind somebody on the ramp. Wait till you're actually at the runway to take off to turn those on. But yes, you definitely want to use them. In my opinion.
And on this one, somebody mentioned tomato flames too. They said, don't try to trust your memory. I agree with that. Go look at the regs. I have it on my phone and on my iPad. So if it actually is, this is tomato flames and grab card and all that stuff is more of a memory thing. And so I use it as more of a clue of like, oh yeah, I better go look. But it's for memorizing it for the check ride is really what that's about. And then it's just useful to know like, oh, I'm pretty sure that's one of those required things. Go look if you're determining if something is inoperative. Okay. Let's get to that next one here. Preventive maintenance. Let's say that something is broken, right? So you come across and maybe it is the beacon, or actually it's probably easier one of the strobe lights, because those are even on a Cessna high wing that you can get to those relatively easily. Yeah. Can you fix it? Can you do it yourself, preventive maintenance wise? And of course, under Part 43, Appendix A, the owner or operator is authorized to perform preventive maintenance. So that means even if you're renting, you are authorized, although you might want to, if you're at a place you're renting like a school or something, you might want to talk to them about that. But especially if you're an owner, then you are allowed to do preventive maintenance. What stuff are you allowed to do? Check it out in Appendix A. I'm sure you all remember that. But here is the key that I know I wanted to emphasize on this, which is that while you may be authorized to fix whatever things on this list, and in fact, I think I put an article on here. There is an AOPA article I found that says you can even fix more than what's on that list by FAA interpretation. There's an AOPA article about that. That it needs to be done to industry standards. In other words, it needs to be done the way that it says in the service manual for the airplane. So if you don't know how to change a light bulb the way that a mechanic would do it, then you really shouldn't do it. You need to go get a mechanic, and then you can always have them teach you, or somebody that knows how to do it the proper way, and then log it. And that's the key part. It needs to be done the way that an AMP would do it. So you are authorized, but as long as you know the proper way. So any thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, there's a question about student pilots not authorized to do preventative maintenance, and I think that is correct. I think it's private pilot and above, or recreational sport pilot and above. But yeah, I would, you know, if you don't know what you're doing, definitely grab a mechanic and have them show you. You know, have them stand by as you attempt to do it, and have them correct anything that you can't do or you're not doing correctly. And that's important. I mean, I went through 4 years of college and a flight training program, never once looked under the cowl of an airplane, which in my opinion is a huge disservice to everybody that went through the program. So when I became a flight instructor, I made sure that on those rainy days when we weren't going flying, we went out to the hangar, we pulled the cowling off, and I showed them the stuff in there. And the stuff that I didn't know, I got one of our mechanics to come out and talk to the students about. You know, it was a big eye opener for me when I got into Civil Air Patrol, and we were expected to help perform maintenance on the airplane. And you know, yes, I was pulling out seats, I was unscrewing inspection covers and all that kind of stuff. All the dirty work that the mechanic didn't want to do, that's fine. But that was really the eye opener for me, that I really needed to understand this information as a pilot and you know more about my airplane. So highly encourage that.
Exactly. And then somebody mentioned that, so as Drew mentions here, if the ground strap on the light breaks, you're in trouble. And so that's a key part. That's why doing it properly is really important. We do have a question that says the date of manufacture affects the use of strobes. I think of a plane manufactured before 1990. I did just go check the reg. It was 96. Had an optional strobes, you don't need them on. That's where you'd want to check your equipment, because the reg does say if it's certified after 96, then it has that. But check your equipment list in the airplane. That's where that type certificate data sheet comes into play, where things weren't required before, but may be now. So it's that going through that whole process. Okay, let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. Our next topic is, oh, this is a good one. This is an interesting one. The AIM, I know. The AIM does such a good job talking about, here are all the things that we want you to do. Do it this way, say things this way, telling us in a positive way. But there's one thing that they say that you should not say. Literally, and here's the actual, I took the quote out of there. Out of the AIM, it says, traffic in the area, please advise, is not a recognized self-announced position and or intention phrase, and should not be used under any condition. So I know that I've heard people say this out flying. And so one of the things you don't want to do is, if you're at a non-towered field, don't use this phrase, traffic in the area, please advise. Instead, what I like to do is 10 miles out, I'll make my initial call. Say, this is a 65659er, 10 miles to the west, inbound for landing or something like that. I just make that initial call, because when I do that, if anybody else is in the pattern, they're typically going to chime in and say, hey, I'm on downwind, I'm on base, I'm about to take off. But doing that traffic in the area just cues everybody up to start talking over one another. And so it's just please don't use that one. That's directly out of the AIM, and it seems like that's a common one. Have you run across that one, John, in the sense of that traffic in the area thing?
Yeah, more often than I like. And our colleague Jamie wrote a good article not too long about some of the other interesting things that we hear on the airwaves, and last call and that sort of thing. And it's like, yeah, just use what's in the AIM. I mean, it's there. Don't use traffic in the area, please advise. That's I hate that. And please don't take the runway. Leave it for me. I want to use it. I mean, I could get on a soapbox for a while on this sort of thing. Yeah. So yeah, use standard procedure. It works. People understand it. If you don't know how to do it, sit down and practice it. Write out a script. I've done that with students. And I've practiced with them being air traffic control and going back and forth and asking them to, give me a radio call. Tell me you're outside the airspace, you want to come into it. Give me a request. I'll give you what we normally hear. I'll give you some different things. And, use what's in the AIM. It's there for a reason. Everybody can understand it. And, it's really makes things a lot easier.
So there's a good question here from Luis. It says, how do you ask which the current active runway at a non-towered airport without saying, please advise? So this is the idea of traffic in the area, because what you're asking for in that phrase is, everybody who might be around, tell me where you are, because that's what that's getting at. But if you're trying to get out, like, what's the runway in use, instead what you could do there is make your position call. And the first thing I do is I'll make that position call and I'll listen. Right. And so if somebody's there, they're probably going to tell me. And then it's like, if it's not crazy busy, I could ask that question. Otherwise, if nobody's in the pattern, then you're going to have to figure it out anyway. So hopefully you've listened to the AWAS or ASOS if they got one. And so you could listen, help that determine it. But then I fly over the pattern anyway, or fly over the airport and look down and see what's going on. Of course, 500 feet above the highest pattern altitude. Right. But that's how you would do that. And again, it's not like you can't use English to ask questions, but just this traffic in the area, don't have everybody trying to say where they are.
And there is actually a term that you can use, and it's, Winchester traffic or Winchester Airport or Winchester Unicom actually is the correct name. Let me rephrase that. Winchester Unicom, Cessna 12345, 10 miles west, inbound landing, airport advisory. And if there's somebody at the desk, they may have information there. They can give you some basic weather information, maybe the winds, maybe an altimeter setting, and tell you what runway is in use. Or they may say, well, there's nobody in the pattern, use whatever you want. And if they're the only person there and they're out refueling, you might not get an answer. But if you've made the position report and you start listening to what's going on there, you'll, like Chris said, you'll be able to figure out what runway they're using. Now, I have gone head to head with another aircraft on a runway at a non-towered airport, and sometimes that you do have to really pay attention. Sometimes there's some Nordo aircraft out there that don't have a radio and can't give a position report. It may not hear you make a position report. So the key here is to have good situational awareness, be looking around, trying to spot where aircraft are, and if you need to, like Chris said, overfly the airport. It's one of the best ways to see what's going on.
And a couple of questions came up. Can you always fly over, or do you always fly over the airport? It depends. Somebody mentioned airspace is a good reason that you may not be able to. And then the other things that I would do too is if I hear other traffic in the pattern and I know which runway they're using, then no, I'm not necessarily going to overfly it. Maybe I'm on the same side where the pattern is. I might just set up for the 45 and enter in that case. So you have to use good judgment here and just some practical parts of it. But typically, if I don't hear any traffic, then I'm probably going to overfly just so I can see what's going on, especially if there's somebody without a radio to check. But I'm going to look just to see what's happening and figure out which way the wind is operating. So, all right, let's go to this next one, because I know we've got a bunch of stuff we're trying to cover. We've got about 20 minutes left in our normal time. Now, alcohol and flying. Now, I know that everybody remembers 9117 or 9117, and it's the part about 8 hours bottle to throttle and all that other stuff. And those at 0.0, I think it's 0.04 blood alcohol content. Right. The key one that to me that stood out, I was thinking was this idea of in the reg under B, it says that except in an emergency, no pilot may allow a person who appears to be intoxicated or who demonstrates by manner or physical indications that they are under the influence of drugs, except of course if it's like a prescription drug, to be carried in the aircraft. So this is one, like maybe you've flown out, you've taken the friends or family out, you went and had some dinner, they've had a few drinks. If you feel like they're under the influence, you really should not be, you're not, actually should not be, you are not allowed to take them back in the airplane. Right. And the reason, of course, is because as you go up in altitude, the air pressure is less and the alcohol has a greater effect. I had a friend of mine, another flight instructor, talked about how this exact thing happened. The people were fine on the ground. He got them up to altitude and they started acting wacky. And he's like, what is going on? They came back down and they were fine again. And he realized that's what this was about, is because as you get to altitude, the alcohol has a greater effect on you. And so they basically got drunk as they got altitude and as they descended back down. So imagine if the person was actually acting drunk on the ground or under the influence, how bad it would be to get them to altitude. So just think about that. So it's actually a reg. So it's a thing to warn your passengers about. Like, hey, if you guys drink too much, I can't take you back in the airplane. You're gonna have to stay here or something. So just to go in. All right, let's go.
Drew makes a very good comment. You can't be a designated pilot for your bar hopping buddies. So yeah, that's absolutely right.
Exactly.
You cannot do that. So.
All right. So the flight review. This one, this is like, I just wanted to do a minor point on this one. It's just a little, maybe it's a pet peeve of mine, I don't know, but I always hear people talk about the BFR, the biennial flight review. And that changed a number of years ago just to be called just the flight review. And the reason, and I put the article, AOPA was involved in this, but I couldn't find an AOPA article that talked about it. So there was a guy, found an article in this flyaft.com who talked about what happened, and he even mentioned that AOPA was a part of this. There was a time when the flight review, I don't remember this one, but maybe it was before I became a pilot. It was they changed it to 1 year. You had to do it every year. There was a big hubbub, so they backed off of that, and then they went to back to the 24 calendar months. But the FAA wanted to encourage people, you don't have to wait 2 years to take it. We would suggest do it more often than that. Get refresher training. It's a good idea. And John, did you want to talk a little bit about ASI's program on that?
Yeah, I can. We've updated and relaunched our focus flight reviews. Again, you can find that on our website, but those go in depth in a specific topic area that you and your flight instructor can do that will cover everything that's required in a flight review, plus focus on those areas, things like positive aircraft control, mountain flying, seaplane operations, all kinds of stuff, instrument work. That you can use, and there's some self-study stuff that you can do ahead of that. So we have a whole list of that information that you can sit down and kind of read through. And the other key point I want to make, Chris, is we always talk about flight review is an hour of ground and an hour of flying. When I've talked to the FAA, and they've been very specific on this point, that is only for somebody that's actually a current and proficient pilot. If you're not current, if you haven't flown in a while, if you're not proficient, it's going to take longer. You might not be able to get it all done in an hour. So folks that come in thinking, oh, it's just going to be 1-on-1, well, maybe not. I mean, we're taking all this time here today to go through some of these regulations, and there's many more that will be covered as part of a flight review. So just kind of keep that in mind. And it's not that the instructor is trying to gouge you for extra money so they can pay their rent this month. It's because they're trying to do a good job and make sure that you're going to be a safe and proficient pilot. So it's important to go into it with the right attitude. There's also the wings program that you can use that requires 3 ground tasks to be done and 3 flying tasks to be done. Those could be done in a single flight. Sometimes they're spread out over multiple flights, but the fact that you're sitting here in this webinar today, you're going to get wings credit that you can use towards that. So there's lots of programs out there that you can do. Whatever you do, I'd encourage you to make regular proficiency flights. That's something I know I have to I struggle with, because as an instructor, I'm always up with a student. I'm never usually up on my own, and I have to schedule the flight for me to go up and make sure that I can do what I need to do. Whether it's going to be demonstrating a new maneuver to a student or whether it's just getting my takeoff and landings in. That's important that I have that currency and that proficiency. More important to have the proficiency than currency.
Exactly.
We can be current, but we can't be, and we can be current but not proficient. So
totally agree with you, John. It's important to go up and be proficient, because it's one thing to be legally current and another thing to actually be proficient and safe. So let's go ahead and jump in. We're running out of time on the regular stuff. And by the way, there was one question that kept popping up, 91, or something about the having D-cell sized batteries in a flashlight. And somebody put the reg up on 91503. That is for large and turbine powered aircraft. And they were asking if it's always been there. I'm not familiar, because I did fly a Beech 99, but I was flying under Part 135. I don't recall that necessarily being a requirement, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't.
I vaguely remember something from when I was learning to fly, Chris, and went for my commercial check ride in the late 80s. Something about it, it was like a commercial requirement for D-cell batteries, but we always flew with mini mags, and that was just in training. So
right. So that one specifically, this is under Part 91 subpart F, large and turbine powered aircraft. So it's not going to really affect most of us flying our piston aircraft. All right. For passenger carrying currency, the key thing here, and I'll try to go through these relatively quickly, because I think these are pretty straightforward, simple ones. For the passenger carrying, we all know that 3 takeoffs and landings every 90 days. I'm sure that we remember the one for tailwheel, it's to a full stop, or for nighttime, it's to a full stop as well, while flying at night, which is coming up. But the key one that some people seem to forget is the category and class. Category and class. So when you do your 3 takeoffs and landings, it's got to be in the same category and class of aircraft that you're going to then take passengers in. So in other words, if I did my 3 takeoffs and landings in a glider, that will not count for my airplane carrying. And if I do my 3 takeoffs and landings, because that's a different category, glider and airplane are different categories. It's also different class. Class is getting into, like, airplane's the easiest one that I can think of to explain that. You have airplane, and then it's multi-engine and single engine. So if you do your 3 takeoffs and landings in a multi-engine airplane, it does not count for flying a single. So you've got to do it in the same category and class. So in other words, if you do it in a Piper Cub, that works for a 172 or a Cessna 182, but it will not work for going and flying a Baron, different class of aircraft. So just keep that one in mind as you're doing it. I want to go ahead, if it's okay, John, and jump to this next one.
Sure.
Logging nighttime. I know that both of us worked in AOPA's Pilot Information Center. This is probably one of the most common things that would come up if people ask about logging time. Did you want to just take this one a bit? We have a great, by the way, great link here. And somebody did mention links aren't working. If for some reason it won't click in the notes, try copying and pasting the link and sticking it in your browser, because that's where you get them.
Yeah. So this is actually organized chronologically. So sunset to sunrise, position and anti-collision lights need to be on. That's pretty straightforward. Make sure you have those on. End of evening civil twilight to beginning of morning civil twilight, that's when we're logging the flight time, and the aircraft needs to be night equipped if you're operating it in that time. It doesn't have to be, you have to make sure you have all the stuff that's required in 91205. And then for currency, this is the 1 hour after sunset, ending 1 hour before sunrise. And in some cases, you're pretty close to when the civil twilight ends. There is a place you can go to the U.S. Naval Observatory to get the specific times for it. It's online. I just make sure I do everything 1 hour after sunset to 1 hour before sunrise, and that's that keeps me out of trouble with all that. I make sure at sunset I turn on my lights. So it's that's the easiest way to remember it. Lights on, then you can log flight time, and after that, 1 hour after sunset, 1 hour before sunrise, that's when you're going to be able to log the landings for currency purposes. So.
And this all came from, there was a Bold Method article that I linked in there. I was doing my best to find a good AOPA article, but Bold Method did such a good job explaining this. That's why I put that link in there. It really broke it down nicely. And I know somebody, I think it was Peter, he mentioned it in his question or comment, that it's like, why didn't they just make it all one requirement? Why this 30 minutes after, hour after this?
Right.
I don't know, and unfortunately, that's a tougher one. But they broke it down really well here. So the anti-collision lights have to be on sunset to sunrise, like you mentioned, and then we got the other ones broken down. So check out that article. It does such a great job explaining it. We could probably do almost a half an hour just trying to discuss the finer details of all of that. So okay, the next one is night currency. This is an interesting one. Both John and I came up with both. We were brainstorming this and we were thinking, like, what's one that people don't know about? And of course, I know because I'm a CFI, and it happened to come up because I was wondering, I have a student, we need to go do our night flight. Do I need to go up and do my 3 takeoffs and landings really quick before because it's like I've been flying, but I just hadn't been night current. And there's actually a letter of interpretation from the FAA in 2007, the Olshock/Pan Am letter. They're from it was a Pan Am flight school out in Arizona, and it said, can a CFI who is not night current instruct a student pilot at night? And of course, the answer is yes, they can, believe it or not. And the reason is because the FAA apparently doesn't consider student pilots to be passengers. So you're not taking them up for a ride. You're not taking them up for moving them around. You're taking them up to instruct them. So that is actually okay. So again, it's up to your judgment too about your safety. Do you feel like you still be safe flying at night? But again, the CFIs are allowed to do that. Take a student for a night flight, even if they aren't night current. You can't take a regular passenger though. Obviously, you can't take a backseat observer either.
Yeah, I want to go back real quick to the night stuff for a moment, Chris, in terms of takeoffs and landings. As a sport pilot, when is night over and legal to take off? Joseph asked that question, and that would actually be beginning of morning civil twilight. So roughly, and this is a very rough rule of thumb, research it, make sure you get the correct time, but roughly 30 minutes before sunrise is about the beginning of morning nautical, morning civil twilight, excuse me. So look that up and you'll be able to do it. If you do it at sunrise, it's certainly not nighttime. You can log that, fly as a sport pilot for that. So that's.
Yeah, again, thank you. Good clarification. I'm glad you knew that, because I didn't know that right off the top of my head like that, John. That's pretty good. All right, Scott has got a good question. We'll see if we can come back to that one. Oh, shoot. I wanted to mark that one. And I don't know if you know the answer to this one, because I don't know off the top of my head, but he's asking, would they be able to still instruct because the student technically isn't a passenger? Exactly right. Now the one below, but the student must qualify as PIC if the instructor is not night current. And according to that letter of interpretation, and correct me if I'm wrong, no, actually the CFI still, it could be PIC because you're not carrying passengers. They still have to be current otherwise, like flight review current, et cetera. But that landing thing is just for carrying passengers. And so the CFI is still okay. All right. Let's see, there's tons of questions. I'm trying to pay attention. Let's go ahead and jump to the next one, and we'll go back and look at those questions as well. Okay. All right. When do I need an instrument proficiency check? IPC, instrument proficiency check. And this is one that's often confusing. So I hope on this slide I tried to break it down to be relatively simple, and in the notes as well. And so it's out of the regs. So the basic deal is that in order to stay instrument proficient, you have to do your 6 instrument approaches, holding procedures, and tasks as listed, and intercepting and tracking of navigational aids within the 6 months preceding the month of your flight. If you don't have these tasks, the 6 approaches, the holding, and everything else, within the 6 preceding months of your flight, you're no longer instrument current. So now you've got to go up and do those tasks, the approaches, et cetera. Do that before you can go fly instruments, before you can act as pilot in command on an instrument flight plan or under instrument rules. If you go another 6 months past that, so in other words, you were 6 months, you hit that next month, you're out of currency now, and you go another 6 months, now you need an IPC. So it's basically the 12 months, out of, well, I should say, so you're within 6 months, within the month of your flight, you go past that, another 6 months past that, that's when you now need to go do an IPC instead. So you can't just go shoot approaches, use a safety pilot or go in a sim or something to make it up. You've got to go with an instrument instructor and do your IPC. So it's the 6 months after not being current. Yeah. And the thing I wanted to remind you of here is that if you need to do an IPC, you're going to go with an instrument instructor. And to see what you need to do on the IPC, there is a reg, but the reg really doesn't describe it very well. The actual tasks that you need to do is in the Airman Certification Standards, the Instrument Airman Certification Standards. So if you look in the table of contents, you'll find towards the back, there's a section that says Instrument Proficiency Check, and it lists out all the things that you need to do.
Yeah.
All right. Any thoughts? I know you're looking at questions there too, John.
Yeah, so there's good questions here. Do you have to log each holding event and approach? Yeah, if you're trying to count these up, you do definitely want to keep track of them, particularly in the 6 months preceding an instrument flight. And then if you're doing it after that 6 months and you're in that little window before you have to take an IPC, yeah, definitely want to write them down. Drew asked, what if you do the approach illegally? Well, that's on you, and you log it if you want to. I'm not. Yeah, no, sorry.
No,
I'm a scoutmaster. I can't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Does the instrument currency be done with VFR? That's a good question. How many landings did you do?
Yeah, all right. So we'll try
approaches in one landing, or yeah, no, that's a good question.
All right, tell you what, we've got one more slide left before, because actually we can end, and then we can go back and just hit questions and take as many of those as we can get in. The last, as I recall, I believe this is the last slide. Yep, basic med currency. I'm hoping that a lot of you folks are familiar with doing the basic med, or what basic med is. It allows you to have or to fly an active pilot in command without having a medical certificate. Instead, what you do is you use a valid driver's license. You have to go see a state licensed physician who then completes this form. It's an FAA form that they fill out for you every 48 months. And you must take an online medical self-assessment course. It's a free online course. AOPA offers it every 24 calendar months. So those are the requirements: valid driver's license, that the medical exam with a state licensed physician, fills out the form, and then take the course every 24 calendar months. If you do these things, then you can use basic med. Now, let me back off one thing. If you're not sure, like if you've never done basic med, you haven't checked for your qualification, do go check out the link or just look up AOPA basic med. There are some qualifying things. It's like if it's your first time using it, you've got to go back and look, when was your last effective medical? I didn't want to get into all that detail today. It is on our website. It's very clear on there. But the big part I wanted to say is that staying current, because this is a common question I know that we get called about, is that idea of how do you keep it current? And it's that physicians thing every 48 months. You've got to take that course every 24. And John, I know you mentioned you've got to do it in a particular order to make sure that it all goes through.
Yeah, so you need to do it in a particular order, which is essentially going and seeing the physician first. And one caveat with the physician thing, I know we didn't want to get too deep into the weeds, but as an example, if I had a basic med exam, physical exam, let's say June 5th, 2018, I need to have one I need to have one on June 5th, 2022. If I go past June 5th, my basic med has expired, even though perhaps I took my medical self-assessment course 24 months ago, and that's valid to the end of June. My basic med is done when my medical exam expires, and that expires on the date, not by the month. So take the exam, do the online course, put the information together, submit it to the FAA, keep a copy with your logbook, go fly.
Perfect. And then you're good to go. And I know we got some other questions, but I tell you what, let's do the official end to the webinar, and then we'll hit these questions, because I was just watching all the basic med questions come flying in. We'll go back and see what we can do for you guys. All right. So we're going to come to the official end here. There's the code if you like doing the AOPA app and pilot passport. I know that Stephen often talks about this. I'll just give you the quick rundown, which is basically it's an app that lets you check in at various airports. You can earn points, and then I know AOPA does occasionally give out prizes depending on points and doing drawings and that sort of thing. But the redemption code is right there. It's YCF, as in you can fly, web, as in webinar, and then 051922, or May 19th, 2022. So that's your code right there if you want to use the app. Please be clear, this is not wings credit. This has nothing to do with wings credit. It's purely more for fun for the AOPA app and Pilot Passport, not wings credit. For wings credit, you don't need to do anything as long as you're attending live and you've given us the email that you use for your FAAsafety.gov account. That will work. We will get you the wings credit. We take care of that for you. So no worries there. So the AOPA app is more for fun. If you like it, check out the code. That is not wings credit, however. We'll do questions here in a moment. There's the code again, and you get 1,000 points for if you do that. And again, that is purely for fun. That is not the wings credit part. And I guess what we'll do now is go back and see if we can answer some questions.
Yep.
And by the way, for those who can't hang around, we will answer questions up until about 1:30 Eastern time. If you can't hang around, you have completed the webinar, so you're good to go. So we want to appreciate you being here. But for those that like to hear the answers to these other questions, we'll answer as many as we can. So hang out and we'll do that. Oh, and by the way, next month, I did forget this. Next episode is June 30th. We're going to do a little later in the month due to some PTO and travel that's happening, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern. And our topic will be bundle your procedures with flow. And the idea here is we're going to talk about how you can use a flow and effectively use checklists. So I know this is one that I've talked about. We're going to share some tips on how you can make your flying maybe a little smoother and make it a little easier on you. Okay, let's go back and hit some of these questions. So John, I know it's going to be a challenge, but let's go hit some of these questions out. Do you see anything that pops out at you?
There's a bunch of stuff related to basic med. One question Paul's asking, if we have basic med info in our logbook, are we required to carry the logbook with us? No, actually, you're not required to carry the logbook with you, but you do have to have that information, and it does have to be made available upon request if it is requested. So you can do that. Let's see, there was another question down here. John had asked, where is it? Doesn't basic med also require that pilots must also self-ground if we know or should know that we have a medical condition that is grounding under the regs? So there is a list of, I think, 10 different medical conditions that would require an FAA medical, a special issuance medical certificate. And if you have a condition that falls into that, then you must follow those procedures. Otherwise, it's just like with any other medical certificate, you have to do a self-assessment every time you go fly. We talk about the I'm safe checklist, but you should be aware of what's going on. So if you have a condition that might be might be conducive to not flying, let's say you have a cold, for example, or sinus headache or something like that, yeah, definitely ground yourself. Other conditions, if they're not part of the 10 conditions that are listed, then you should, again, do a self-assessment, decide whether or not you want to go fly that day.
Let me hit, there's two other questions I saw in basic med that stood out to me. One was, I thought a doctor had to be seen every 2 years over the age of 40. You're thinking of the regular, like a third-class medical, right, which is where you have to do that. The basic med is not that same process. It's a different process. So it's literally under the regs, it's flying or acting as pilot in command without having a medical certificate because it uses different rules. And then the other one that somebody asked as well on that was, oh, can you fly if you had a special issuance? That's where you want to go to our website, because the answer is yes, maybe. It depends. So you just need to go to the website. It will break down the conditions, because there are some certain medical conditions that may preclude you, but for the most part, yes. In fact, I can tell you that I had a special issuance. I have sleep apnea and have to use the machine thing, and so I had a special issuance for that. And then when basic med came out, I was able to transition over to that, because that was, for the most part, the answer is yes. But go to the website, check it out, or give us a call at 1-800-USA-AOPA, 1-800-USA-AOPA, and the Pilot Information Center will be glad to help you out with that too if you want to run through that and see. All right, I got an IPC question here, John. Maybe we can hit this one. I'm trying to work my way backwards. And Stephen, maybe if you can keep track of the new ones that are coming in, I can't look at everything all at once. The IPC one was, I thought this was a good one. It says, if an IPC is completed on January 1st, when is the last day an IFR flight can be completed under that January 1 IPC? So the IPC just basically restarts you over again with full currency. So you have 6 months all the way through June, right? You got that 6 months, but then notice the reg says it's within the 6 months preceding the month of the flight. So if you completed your IPC in January, we're talking calendar months, You go all the way through June, and you can actually go ahead and fly in July up to the end of July. Once July 31st comes and you have not done your 6 approaches, now you're out of currency. Now you've got to start, and that's when you have to start. Like I have to go shoot my 6 approaches within that 6 months following the first 6 months to get current again. And then if you don't do it by the end of the year, then you got to go do an IPC.
Yep.
Hope that's clear. And please, I know you're also a double I, John, so don't be afraid.
That works. That's exactly correct.
Okay, cool. Because I'm this is pulling stuff out that I don't always use all the time, so it's good to review.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see any other questions? That I know we got more questions. I'm just scrolling.
Oh, yeah, we've got lots of them.
So maybe we can just kind of leapfrog them. So go ahead and take one, and I'll look for the next one after that.
Okay. Let's see. No, we talked about that one.
And by the way, somebody's asking, does the instrument currency have to be? Does the instrument currency be done with VFR? In other words, can it be done in VFR? Yes, I'm assuming you already are current, or you're just trying to get back to being current and you don't need an IPC. Yeah, you could do it in VFR conditions with a safety pilot and under the hood. And somebody asked, can I do that in a sim? Yes, you can do that in an approved simulator. Totally can do that, and that will count as well. In fact, the cool thing is now the regs have changed. You don't have to have an instrument instructor with you anymore in the sim. So as long as you are either instrument current or you just don't require an IPC yet, you actually can go in the sim and shoot your approaches and get yourself current again. Although if it's been a while, it might be worthwhile getting an instrument instructor in there with you just to help give you the right tasks and simulate everything. Go ahead,
yeah.
John.
And Chris, I think you're probably a more current double I than I am. So this is a good question. Is GPS track not on a VOR radial considered tracking a nav aid for the purposes of currency?
Yes, because if the actual reg doesn't say nav aid in the sense of like a VOR, it just says navigational aids, or I think I'm blanking right now on what I put in that slide. But yes, system, GPS does count for that, so the tracking. And in fact, if you use LBS mode, you can make the thing act like a VOR anyway. So yes, that totally counts using GPS.
Okay.
And like you said too, I did want to mention, you mentioned that somebody asked about, do you need to log holds? Yes. So it's that I put that in my logbook. I will literally write down, I did holding procedures. I'll write the stuff out of the regs. I did tracking and intercepting. And really is what I do for myself is I'll go take off from an airport. Usually I use the sim. I'll do like an ODP, and I'll do a departure procedure. And then I'll go fly, and I might move it to get closer, shoot the approach. I'll go mist, do the hold. And that way I could all of it all combined into one, because by shooting the approach, now I'm also tracking nav aids and intercepting and all the other stuff. So you can be very efficient with it. I can usually within an hour do 2 approaches and a hold or 2 in every session. All right, let's see if we can get something other than instrument for our folks out there.
Let's see.
There we go.
Michael, I don't know the answer to your question about whether chiropractors can do a basic med exam in addition to licensed physicians. I've only seen state licensed physicians be called out for that, but I'd have to check with our medical certification department to find out the answer specifically. But good question. And I know there are a couple of questions there. You know, folks have problems finding a physician to do a basic med physical. Yes, that's while we have a list on our website, that is not a comprehensive list, and I know I have had myself to look around to find somebody to do it, and I think I'm on my 2nd doctor for that right now. So, but that's fine. That's fine. I've got an appointment. I'll be current. Well, I am current, but I'll be basic med examined here shortly. So, and
hopefully your primary care will do that for you. And one of the things too is we have on the basic med website, or on the AOPA part of it, we have a thing that says questions, like common questions or frequently asked questions for your doctor. And one thing that I've heard people have success with is like oftentimes they will fill out people's DOT form for driving a truck or a vehicle. Just explain to them it's the same thing. It's basically the exact same thing as that. It's just from the FAA. So if you put it in those terms, you know, the doctor maybe will be more willing to do that.
Yep.
Got a question here about traffic patterns. It says, sorry, I joined late. You said 500 feet over the highest pattern altitude when you're crossing an airport. Does that count for turboprops and jets? Yes, it does. So in other words, that I assume what you mean is that it does say the turboprop or jet pattern. So if they have a turboprop or jet pattern, which may be 2,000 feet above it, then you want to fly 500 feet above that. So it depends on what kind of things are happening. You can use the chart supplement, look in your thing and see if whatever patterns might be listed, and see in there, like, you know, like if they say a certain pattern, fly 500 feet above, because you don't know what might be operating there, and you want to stay clear of the traffic. You don't want to go busting through the pattern.
Looking for another question here. I know we've got a number of them.
Well, just looking through these, John, you mentioned having some trouble finding the doctors and appointment
Yes.
times. One person's question was if a basic med expires because you didn't timely do the requirements to renew, can you resurrect it within 1 year after expiration, or by simply doing the physical exam, test, etc.?
I don't know that there's a time limit on resurrecting a basic med, but I would imagine that if you were to stop flying for a period of time and you still met the look back requirements for having held an FAA medical certificate, then you could certainly go and get a basic med exam and just start it all over again. And just to have a different month and a different calendar period for you. In terms of, if I'm a June guy, then all of a sudden for whatever reason I can't get it done, and now it's September or August, maybe even next June, yeah, go ahead, go for it.
Yeah, and in fact, to get more detailed, you can give us a call at 1-800-USA-AOPA. Our medical team will probably be able to definitely give you the rundown on that. So 1-800-USA-AOPA. I've got a question here from Robert. This is from a ways back. It says, please comment on the use of tail number at non-towered airports. I've had this question before on previous ones too, and said, should you use your tail number? I like to do that because I know some people say, I just want to use the red Cessna, or I want to use the yellow Cub. But the thing is, it's like, I still use my tail number. I'll still say Cessna. I'll say Cessna, or Skyhawk 25392 or whatever I might be. So I think the number is good because that way you avoid confusion about, well, which Cessna is it or whatever, because you got to figure most of us are in white airplanes. It seems to be the typical thing. So
right, and I'm pretty sure the FAA actually requires us to use our registration number.
There you go.
So
I'm just jumping ahead, looking at there's another red one.
And in their non-towered airport ops AC, they also recommend against using a color only, so that you should use the make and model and number. So Skyhawk 12345, left downwind runway 26, Umpty Squad Airport.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to jump down to the end because I'm looking through the red ones. I think we've answered.
Different ones.
All right. Any news on basic med in Canada? Did we hear anything more about that?
I was just looking at the last update Gary posted online March 1st. I don't see anything in there, but I'm skimming it rather quickly.
Okay, take a look at that. I'm going to answer this one really quick. It says, I may have missed it, but logging PIC slide, I wanted to verify when I'm acting as safety pilot, my partner's under the hood under IFR, am I still allowed? Number one, the article we've got is great on this stuff. So to all these different concerns, but yes, you are allowed as long as you're current, you're allowed to be the safety pilot and the other person's flying. What you do is when that person puts the hood on, they say to you, you're now the pilot in command and you're acting as pilot in command. So they can log PIC because they're the sole manipulator of the controls. And you can log PIC because they've designated you as the PIC. You are a required crew member as safety pilot, and you can both log PIC during that instrument currency part of that. So yes, that's a good way to save some money too.
We want to touch on basic med safety pilots, Chris?
Yeah, so and also, I guess the question you're getting at is, can somebody using basic med be a safety pilot?
So yeah, can you be a safety pilot if you are a basic med holder? And I guess a corollary to that would be, what if the person under the hood is a basic med user and you as a safety pilot are a basic med user? Can that happen? And the answer is yes, but you have to designate who is the pilot in command, and it would be the safety pilot at that particular point in time. So you can do it. You do need to discuss it ahead of time so there's a clear understanding of who is the pilot in command. I'm not talking about logging flight time now. I'm talking about the actual where the responsibility lies for the safe outcome of that flight. And if there's two basic med pilots in there, or even one basic med pilot who's acting as a safety pilot, that basic med pilot is the pilot in command for the flight.
Hey, I got three for right here. I got three that I can hit right in a row, I think. Number one, as Ed asks, Tower sometimes tells me what the pattern altitude is. Is that regulatory? Yes, because they have that reg that says that we have to comply with ATC instructions, unless, of course, we determine as pilot in command that we can't. like in an emergency. So yes, if they tell you what pattern altitude is, then you are supposed to comply with it. Because remember, they're keeping us separated. Like here at Frederick, we've got helicopter traffic, we've got us, it could be, jet traffic above us. So absolutely, if ATC tells you traffic pattern, that is regulatory until it's necessary for you to start descending for a landing. So good question. Somebody asked on the basic med, actually I'm gonna hit these 2 in a row here. Does intercepting and tracking the localizer count for navigation aid tracking? It does, because it is a navigational aid. I guess what I would want to warn you about maybe, or I would caution you just out of, and this is more practical maybe rather than regulatory, is if your idea is like, I just want to go shoot ILSs and get instrument current, well, obviously the approach part is good, but I'd also encourage you to maybe fly the full approach so you get used to the other parts that we do on an instrument flight. So maybe coming from a VOR feeder route onto the ILS rather than just getting vectored onto it all the time. So think about the practical currency that you might need for safety purposes when you're in the clouds. So while, yes, it absolutely counts for navigation aid tracking, don't do it to the exclusion of doing the other stuff because you're trying to be super efficient. Remember, think practically for safety purposes too and proficiency. And then,
okay, go ahead. You got one more still?
Just one more. It's a basic med one, and this is one that's in our Rusty Pilots course, is if I have an airplane that's certified under 6,000 pounds, but later VGs added increasing certified weight above 6,000, can a new weight and balance be added showing the original under 6 weight be used? Okay, so it's for basic med. If that airplane is now certified to operate above 6,000 pounds, then it's a no-go. You can't just load it less than that. Basic med was pretty clear. So if you had some sort of STC or something done to it that makes it able to carry more, then now it's not eligible for basic med anymore. The only one that you can get away with that when it comes to basic med limitations is the airspeed. If it can go faster than, I forget the airspeed off the top of my head, it's 180 or something like that. I can't remember. But whatever it is, you can throttle back and keep it below that airspeed. That's okay with the FAA, but the other ones are not. So you may not do that.
Okay,
right.
And continuing in the basic med theme real quick, this is a comment, and thanks, James, for getting this back to us. According to the FAA, in states that call chiropractors physicians, they can process basic med. So there was a question earlier, somebody asked, well, can my chiropractor do it in the state of Ohio? And if Ohio considers them a physician, then yes, they could do that according to the FAA. The other question that I had, this is one that actually came into us ahead of the show and related to TFRs. So let's address this real quick. Dwayne, thanks for sending that into us. His question is, TFRs around sporting events usually indicate the TFR is a 3-mile radius and from the surface up to and including 3,000 feet AGL. If the stadium is at 750 feet MSL, but there's surrounding terrain within 3-mile radius of the TFR, do you fly the 3,000 foot AGL from the stadium elevation or the highest elevation within the TFR? And he's referencing a particular stadium that's at 750 feet elevation, but there's terrain that varies to up to 1,250 feet within the 3-mile radius. My understanding of this is that the TFR is predicated on the stadium height. And so it's 3,000 feet AGL from the stadium height. So 3,750 would be your height to be above flying over that TFR and to be legal with that. I can't point to anything that says that specifically, but that is actually what I would consider to be a rational interpretation of that based on the height of the stadium. The height above the stadium goes up to 3,000 feet for that TFR. And I'd have to do some more digging to find some specifics on that, but that's my best understanding of it.
Oh, and did you see it, Tom? I did ask Tom about that one, John.
Okay.
And yeah, and he basically said that he did look it up. There's no specific requirement. I think that I'm sorry, I was sort of also looking at questions here, but he said there's no specific thing from the TSA. So just practical caution would be maybe use the highest terrain, add the 3,000 onto that, and then you're covered.
You can do that too.
Yeah.
I would always be conservative around TFR.
Exactly. Just I was kind of thinking like, if in doubt, stay the heck out, right?
Yeah.
Just avoid them, fly around them. Just why get yourself in trouble over something that you could easily avoid? Here's a good one. I don't necessarily know the answer. Maybe you know this one, John. Can you solo under basic med? And I'm thinking like a student pilot, obviously, they'd have to get a medical first.
Well,
and so maybe they're a student pilot for a while and their medical expires. Can they start using basic med? I think the answer is yes, but do you know
the answer is yes. Well, to use basic med, you have to have had an FAA medical certificate, and it cannot have been revoked or you can't have, well, yeah, it can't have been revoked. It has to be a good medical. So once you get there and you're qualified for basic med, then yeah, I don't see any reason. There's no reason that you couldn't solo using basic med. Your student pilot certificate is separate from your medical certificate these days. That change was what, 5 or 6 years ago, and you know, that's the way it works. So yes, you could solo on a basic med.
Cool. Here's one asking about, this is from David asking, to my understanding, they must be qualified for PIC before logging safety pilot time. I have a high performance airplane and had safety pilots not be able to log because they don't have, yeah, they do need to be able to be PIC of the aircraft because they got to be able to take over the aircraft and be legal to do that. So in that case, to be able to log that. Yeah. There are other questions I could dig down deeper and get myself into a hole, and I don't necessarily want to do that, but this would be a good one to give a call to our Pilot Information Center if you've got more questions, David, 1-800-USA AOPA. And these guys are used to answering, and they'll dig into all this stuff for you, stuff that we may not know off the top of our head.
So here's a question from Peter. He's asking about when using the Wings program as a flight review, is the flight review date on the website the official date versus having to have an instructor update the logbook based on information from the Wings program? Every time you complete a module, the review time changes, correct? Not exactly. So every time you complete, like let's say you complete this, you get Wings credit for it. If by completing a module you mean completing a phase of the Wings program, then yes, that phase completion will restart your flight review clock. You should get an endorsement from your flight instructor that you've completed a phase of the Wings program. And if you just have those in, you can point to those as the completion of a flight review. You can also, if I remember correctly, when you complete a phase of the Wings program, you can also print a certificate that shows it as a flight review, if I remember correctly. It's been a little while since I've done one, but yeah, that's in there.
Here's an interesting one from George. Can you be the safety pilot if you're in a light sport airplane and doing instrument currency if the plane qualifies and you are a sport pilot? So can you be the safety pilot if you are in a light sport? And because I guess they're saying that the light sport plane is IFR certified and you are a safety and you're a sport pilot and you're current to be a light sport pilot, then yeah, you could be a safety pilot for that. I can't see why you wouldn't be able to, because if you're, as long as you are able to be the PIC of the aircraft that you're serving as the safety pilot in, then you could be a safety pilot for it. That sounds reasonable to me, right?
Yeah, I'm digging through the regs now to
see if there's any limitation on sport pilot for that. Okay.
Yeah. I may not be able to find it in time, but yeah.
I'll take this one away if you want to look. We've got about 8 minutes left in our times to see. If you're VFR flying to a controlled airport, do you have to tell them of an altitude change? So number one, it depends. Generally, if you're on with ATC and they've, like if you're in some kind of airspace like Bravo or Charlie and they've assigned you an altitude or they told you for traffic, then you need to get permission before changing, because they're doing that for purposes of traffic avoidance. But if you're just out flying and you're coming here to Frederick and you're out, especially if you're outside their airspace, or even if you're in their airspace and they haven't told you an altitude restriction for some reason, then maybe you're coming out of cruise, you're up at 3,000 feet and the pattern's at 1,500, so you're descending to be able to enter the pattern appropriately. No, you don't need to advise them of that. If you want to and it's not busy, you can, but you're not required to do that. Again, use your good judgment. If you feel like it's information that they should know, then let them know. I'm descending out of 3,000 feet, but otherwise you're not required. But again, if they've given you an altitude restriction, then you are not allowed to change that altitude without their permission, unless of course there's an emergency of some sort. Says, we already answered the question now about, can a non-instrument current pilot ask for practice instrument approach in VFR conditions? Yeah, so if you want to ask ATC for a practice instrument approach, sure. If you're in VFR conditions, I'm assuming you're going to have a safety pilot with you so that you can go under the hood so it counts. But absolutely, you can do that in VFR conditions because you're not on an instrument flight plan in that case. So practice VFR is different from an instrument clearance. There we go. Thank you. Casey said that basic med airspeed limit is 250 knots. I was trying to remember what that was. Thank you, Casey.
Good.
All right, did you find that one, John? Are you still looking?
No, I'm still looking. I may have to take an IOU on that.
Okay. When using the WINGS program as a flight review date on the website is the official date versus having to have an instructor update the logbook based on information from the WINGS program. Every time you complete the module.
Yeah, that's the one we talked about a little bit.
Okay.
You know, in using every time you complete a module, it resets the clock, and you get you should have an endorsement from your flight instructor in your logbook that you completed that phase. So you can do that.
I see one here. Beyond the 10-year look back on basic med, can renewal of basic med be completed? So yes, because the reg specifically states in there, and that's again, go to our website, it's pretty clear on there, but the reg has a date, it's July of, and I can't remember the year off the top of my head, I wanna say it's around 2006 or 7. Please don't quote me on that. Go check the website on basic med, AOPA basic med, you'll find it very easily. But it's like there's a date that says as long as you had a medical as of this date, your medical was current as of that date, you can use basic med. So it's not one that moves, it's a set date and time for that 10-year look back, and it just allows you since that time, as long as you had a medical as of that date, you're good to go.
Yeah. And I think there's the question is, there's another question about where is it here? Shoot, I had FAA medicals in the past, but not in how many years, or is there a number to use now to switch and start using basic med? So I'm looking on our website, but I'm pretty sure the look back was from 2015 and goes back, or 2016 and goes back.
Yeah, like I said, I know it's, I can't pull it up right here, but I know it's listed on the website. It has a specific date. We do that in the Rusty Pilots course. Yeah. I just don't remember off the top of my head right here. Somebody asked, I thought a light sport could not be flown in IFR. So that is one. Do you happen to know the answer to that one, John, for the light sport part? Can light sport be used? I am looking. I'll see if we'll.
I think if it's appropriately equipped, it might, and you're rated, which would mean you wouldn't be a light sport pilot, you could do that. But I'm on shaky ground there, and I don't want to give a bad answer to that. That's a good question, Ed. Thank you. You ask the good questions, Ed. I always do. Appreciate it.
That's under part 61. Anyway, all right, we'll see if we can take that one up. So I had someone asked to provide a flight review, but I'm a new pilot, so my 24 months is not up yet. And there somebody I was asking, let me see your flight review. Is there something else I can provide? Yeah, show them your check ride date. So show them the date of your, because I'm assuming you said that you're a new pilot, so show them the check ride because your flight review starts the date of your check ride. So you're good to go. Just say, hey, I haven't had one yet. Here's my check ride date. Just show them your certificate, and that'll count. That's for us, for Sean.
You know, for Pablo being out on PTO, he still has a presence here. Sorry about your Wi-Fi situation, buddy.
He just can't stay away. He loves it.
I don't know.
He loves it.
We'll
if
see
acting as safety pilot, do you log PIC for the duration of the flight or only for the duration while acting as safety pilot? Yes, while acting as safety pilot, not the whole flight. Because as soon as that person takes the hood off, now there's no dual crew required. You don't need the safety pilot anymore. So it's just whoever's the sole manipulator of the controls at that point. So we'll go back to whoever's flying the airplane. So yeah, only while you're acting as safety pilots. You can't. Here's the other one I wanted to mention. It used to be a practice, and I just recently came across this one. I remember it used to be a practice where we would have people go out and fly cross countries together and do it under the hood. So both people could be logging cross country time for like the price of a half, basically, and that is actually not okay. So that is not allowed. So you can log PIC time with someone, but only the person who's actually doing the navigating gets to log the cross country time. So if you're out trying to build time for getting your commercial certificate, what you have to do is you can share the time with somebody building the time, but for the actual cross-country time building, it's whoever happens to be the one flying it. They're logging cross-country, so they just trade legs. So unfortunately, you can't both log cross-country and PIC at the same time while doing the safety pilot. So to clarify again, safety pilot can log PIC time. The person under the hood that's flying the cross-country can log that time and also cross-country time because they're doing the navigating. Okay, we've got 1 minute left. Pablo is on the airplane talking to us.
I know. Like, that's great. So to get back to that IFR, light sport aircraft IFR question, There is one, I think, LSA that is actually certified for IFR, but
yeah, somebody's mentioned here the Bristol. Is that ring any bells?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what that was, but I whipped past it. So, and this is coming from our stuff. So, can I fly a special light sport aircraft in SLSA in IFR conditions or at night? Only day VFR conditions are specifically addressed in the ASTM consensus standards governing the design, safety, and production of those aircraft, being that sport pilots and those exercising sport pilot privileges are limited to flying only in day VFR conditions as seems appropriate. On the other hand, if an appropriately rated pilot, for example, a private pilot with an instrument rating, wants to fly an SLSA under IFR or at night, the aircraft's operating limitations must allow it. And the aircraft must be equipped per 91.205 for VFR flight at night and or IFR flight. And additionally, 91.327D requires that all SLSA to be operated in accordance with the aircraft's operating instructions. Operating instructions differ from operating limitations in that the engine, airframe, and accessory manufacturers issue them. The FAA issues operating limitations. So if you're appropriately rated and would like to operate a special light sport aircraft at night or under IFR, contact the manufacturer to determine if any provisions can be made.
So I think I get where that person was trying to get at. If you're that situation where you've got the person who's using this, they have it appropriately equipped for IFR, it happens to be a sport aircraft, and they're instrument rated, they've got at least a private pilot certificate, right? They're the one trying to practice their approaches. Can the other person, can the safety pilot be a sport pilot in that case? And I would say yes, because they're acting as a VFR pilot, as a safety pilot. The person that's doing the instrument training or instrument practice is obviously not a sport pilot because they can't fly under IFR. Does that make sense? So I still think that the person could be a safe. And again, this is me thinking. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but it makes sense to me that as long as whoever's practicing it, they're obviously doing it because they are able to exercise it. And I agree, sport pilots can't fly instrument stuff, or they can't be instrument rated. But to act as a safety pilot, it's a VFR thing. It's not an instrument thing to be a safety pilot. Because I was a safety pilot when I was a brand new private pilot for somebody. I was just watching traffic and making sure that they didn't hit anything, right? So I think that's appropriate. I think that would work.
Yeah, if there's a remaining VFR, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, obviously remaining VFR, because if you're in the clouds, you don't need a safety pilot for that, because then you can just log actual. So there's no safety pilot required if you're actually in IFR or IMC conditions. Yeah. Okay. So many questions. We've actually gone 2 minutes over, but I want to thank everybody. Thank you, John, for being here. I want to thank all of you for participating. We did our best. Pablo, I know, is on the line, and he's been dying because he couldn't participate. He literally logged on his United flight and dying. It's like, obviously we miss you, Pablo. But John, thanks very much for being here. Stephen, thank you so much. And we will be back June 30th at noon talking about keeping it flowing, as it were. And so it's a bundle, I think it was bundle your pilot procedures with flow or something along those lines.
Bundle your procedures with flow.
Check it out. Hey, go ahead, Stephen.
Bundle your procedures with flow.
There it is.
No copyrighted questions there at all.
Yeah, right.
So, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. We appreciate it. There's so many questions. Please feel free to contact us at ftinitiative@aopa.org. Or if you've got these reg questions, I'm telling you, use our pilot information center at 1-800-USA-AOPA. John and I both used to work in there. Those guys are so sharp on knowing this stuff. It is, in fact, when we have questions, that's who we call and go ask about this stuff because they know it.
Absolutely.
So give them a call, 1-800-USA-AOPA. They will be glad to answer these questions. And I know you guys can stump us, but I challenge you to stump them. They are really, really good. So thanks again. And I guess let's take it away, Stephen.
All right, just also to note, the PIC has email or chat options on the website available as well. So you don't have to call, you can submit things. They will get back to you and answer your questions.
You got it.
All right.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks.
We'll see you all next time.